Okay, so I'll kind of go down these frameworks real quickly and kind of give you the plus minus on them so you can kind of get a feel. So Caliburn Micro is all about convention over configuration. So what he wants to do is have a series of rules in naming conventions that if you follow those conventions, he'll do everything magically for you, which is really kind of cool. It's very easy to use, but because he does all of his binding at runtime, you can't get, I couldn't get, and maybe some people can, I couldn't get the design data to show up in Blend very easily, if at all, which is a big bummer for me in Caliburn Micro. But here's an example of the view. So here's WPF code that defines a stack panel right here, and in the stack panel we have a text block and a button. Now the way that Caliburn works is you just name things. So he has an X name. He called the text block hello string, and he called the button say hello, and the content to be click me. So based on the names of these two objects, he's going to hook that up at runtime. So here is in your view model a property called hello string. Because the hello string property is named the same as the text block, he binds them. Same thing with button here. The button has a say hello, and that'll call this function right here when you click it. When you click this button, it'll call this say hello method because it's named the same. And then he introduces an extra convention that says if you take the same function name and you put a can in front of it, it'll call that to determine whether or not that button is enabled or disabled. So you can have some smart UI where it has some built-in validation. Maybe you don't want your submit button to enable itself until you have all the form filled out on your WPF page. You just put that in the can submit, and he'll bind that up. So you can see it's really clean. The syntax is clean. It's easy to do. MEF to MVVM is a framework where they took the power of MEF, which is I think it's an acronym for Microsoft Extendability Framework. I think that's right. Which is built into .NET 4 now, and he combined that with MVVM. So the views find their view models through MEF, which is a really cool way of finding them, which makes, of course, because of the name, very MEF friendly. Very cool binding. You can do some really powerful stuff with the binding, but the Blend support was limited. I could see the MEF data in Blend, but I had it was a year ago I did this, but I had a lot of problems getting it to come in correctly. Whenever I'd make a change, oh, this is what it was. If I added or removed properties from my view model, then you go into Blend and you recompile, and those properties didn't come in. I had to actually shut down Blend, reopen it, and then I would see those changes. So the interoperability working between Visual Studio and MEF, jumping back and forth, slowed me down a lot. But here is an example of the binding. So you have a text box, and its text is, and use this is standard Microsoft syntax here. You say squiggly binding, and then you can give it an object name, new user.name, and then you can have this mode and validates on errors. These are two methods that the binding uses to know whether or not the binding is going to happen both ways or one way. And then here's the object in the view model. So we just have a property here that returns the new user. When you change it, it just does a on-property changed event. Here is binding of buttons. So we have the command to the button has a binding to add new user command, which is a method on the view model. And then here's a parameter that you can pass when it's clicked. Here is the actual view model that includes the buttons, and this is where the MEF stuff comes in. What he's doing here is he has a public I command for add new user and a cancel command, and those are imported when the view model is constructed. And an import, if you know MEF, that's a kind of a attribute on a, and you can use this in either properties or in constructors, but here's using a constructor importer. So it's an attribute on the constructor that says when you construct add new user view model, go and find one of my assemblies that has an implementation for, and this one here imports cancel add user, and so it goes and finds that one out of an assembly, constructs it, and then passes it to my constructor. So if you watch any of the Unity videos that I've done, this is a lot like Unity, but instead of you having to create a bootstrapper that defines what all of the Unity associations are, it does this at runtime. It actually goes and finds DLLs, walks through them, and pulls out implementations that match these contracts. And I may do a video on just MEF later. And then he has this cool thing here where he defines this button. He says this add new user command button equals, and here he gives his event handler, and you can say what it depends on. It depends on this name being typed in, so that's how he does the can, like the can submit, how we saw in the last one. He does this depends on, and you can give it, he can tag a whole bunch of them here using kind of like a link expression, saying it depends on this one and that one and that one. So if those are all filled in, then this button enables itself. It's kind of cool. You can see how you can see some interesting ways of doing it. It's easy to read. Alright, the last one I looked at, well, the second last one is Prism. And Prism is Microsoft's, and it's not technically an MVVM framework at all. All it is a kind of a skeleton for how to compose UI in regions. So it's not really a fair comparison to put it in here. And going back and looking at this, it's really early on. Microsoft did this Prism stuff a long time ago, and a lot of the newer stuff that's done by these MVVM toolkits made MVVM so much cleaner to work with that you'll see that as you look through this, it's a lot more complicated looking in its binding. So here's a binding here for the click event. He does an interaction trigger, does an event trigger, and that calls a method action, and that's going to call the method name reset. So that's actually, he's binding to an actual method. Instead of using the command argument on a button, he's going through using triggers. So it's a lot more wordy. Here's that same reset method in the view model. Yeah, that's silly. Here's their message relay system. So it's called the event aggregator. And even it was really complicated for me to kind of get my head around. So this one here is registering for an event called ticker, or that's going to get passed an object called ticker symbols selected event. And you subscribe to it, and then you point to a method within your view model that you want to get that event. And then here's how you publish events. You may say event aggregator, get the event of this type and publish this string. So that's how you send and receive messages through their aggregator. So lastly is MVVM Lite. Now this is the one I kind of use the most. So I'm going to be a little partial to this one. I like it because it's really simple, and the help docs online were great. So it gets you up really quick. It had a really nice relay command, which is Laurent's implementation of the I command. And I command is native.NET way of binding methods to buttons or any other command UI that you have in your interface. So he did a interface on top of that, and he called it relay command. And the relay command gives you some extra little nice things that I liked working with that I'll show you in a second. The view model locator that he has, really, it was kind of clunky, and I ended up going with my own approach, and I'll show you that too. Then he has a really cool thing called event to command, where you can take any event in WPF and you can pipe it down to a view model as a command, or one of these relay commands, which is cool. And it is very blendable. So here is an example of the his messaging system, this easy and powerful messenger. So here you say you take your messenger instance and you register with type new story added message which object you want to register. So I say the this pointer. So if this would be, you'd write this code inside of your view model. So the view model would say, for me, call this method new story added. And you can do these methods inline, or you can actually point to a method in your class and it'll hook up to it. Then when I want to send, I just say messenger.default.send, and you just do a new up a class, and you say here's my new story added message, and you can have as many parameters on you want. You stick them in there and you send it, and it'll go and send it to everybody who's registered to that type. It's pretty powerful, and I'll show you that one too. So here's the example of a button doing some command binding and parameter binding, and this is very similar to how the MEFT MVVM one worked. And here is the implementation in the code behind, or not the code behind, the view model. So here's a can do toggle and a do toggle, and then here is the toggle type button, which is the one that's being bound here. You say I want a toggle type button equals a new relay command, do toggle and can do toggle, and you can do this is saying do this method for when you actually click on the button, and do this one when you want to determine if the button is clickable, so whether it's enabled or not. And the way he has it is this relay command, you can construct it with both those parameters or only one. So you can just do the do toggle, and it assumes that it's always available to click, or you can define the other one. And here's a text property binding. So there's a public string called message. You bind to it just by saying binding message. Okay, so I'm going to show you a lot about Expression Blend today and how it kind of correlates with these projects. Expression Blend is a really cool tool. I think the actual Microsoft quote for Expression Blend is, Expression Blend, Visual Studio, Silverlight, and .NET provide the most compelling and seamless design and development workflow on the market today. Rapidly iterate on both user experience and core architecture, evolving your ideas quickly from initial prototype through to completed project. The key components of Expression Blend include behaviors, Visual State Manager, transition effects, and sketch flow. Coupled with the speed and flexibility of this modern workflow, challenge you to push the boundaries and work beyond the limits of what you thought possible. That's from their website. You may have thought, oh my goodness, that's a wordy little way of explaining that. My quick synopsis is, Blend allows you to see stuff that you would see when you run the app without running the app. So you can rapidly iterate over the look and how things kind of respond to the user. So that it's really great user experience tool. And so this comes down to, is it only for designers? Nay, I think everybody who's doing any kind of user experience at all should have a copy of Blend. And it's free for Phone 7, Windows Phone 7, at least it was a year ago. And it's about $84 on an educational license, up to about $460. Alright, so let's go look at some code.